Um, Good morning, all, and thank you for joining this February webinar. We're talking secrets of a successful marketing campaign, and we're thrilled today to be joined by Simon Dell from Organic Agency. Morning, Simon.
Hello, hi everyone.
Great to have you here. And so, Simon, you're a strategist at Organic. Can you give us a quick 60-second overview of Organic? A strategist at Organic. Can you give it?
Sure. So we're based mainly in Exeter in Devon, although we have presences in London and everywhere like that. So multi-service agency. I look after our e-commerce clients, so in the strategy from there. So that includes some brands like Sainsbury's and Decathlon and people like that. And we're a fellow B Corp as well. So that's really at the core of what we hold strong with us. So we're really concerned about the bads in the digital world. So we sit on our ethos of digital for good. So we really try to, make a positive impact in the world with the work that we do. And that goes down to the kind of people that we work with as well, and the work that we do. But I guess that's in a nutshell who Organic are.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, for our listeners today, there'll be an opportunity for a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you think of questions as we go through, and you have an opportunity for free to pick Simon's brain on marketing strategy with the experience that he's got some of those big brands and e-commerce brands, then I would encourage you to do so. I'm Tom, by the way. I'm the sales and marketing director here at Webmart, a B Corp, much like Organic, and we do into sustainable integrated marketing. So looking at the offline as well as the online world. The structure of today. So when we're looking at marketing campaigns, we obviously have lots of different steps that we go through to be able to execute a successful campaign. So we'll try and move through chronologically how we set up campaigns for customers, and then look at what things we can do within each of those areas to give us the best chance of success. So if we start off, Simon, with when a new customer approaches you and you start working with a new brand, and you start working your first campaign, what are the kind of things that you want to know straight off the bat to be able to ensure that the campaign you plan is going to be optimized for success?
So the first thing that we do is just really get really comfortable with who the client is, where they sit in the market, who the audience is, and all that stuff. I know quite often people are really keen to just launch a big campaign, launch a big promotion, but really that's the end of it. You really need to understand who you are in the market and what that means to you, and you get really comfortable with that as well, because by doing proper market orientation, qual research, quant research, all that stuff, it may actually tell you stuff that you didn't really actually want to hear, but it's super valuable. If you want to go from A to Z, you have to go through the steps along there, but you have to really understand where A is, where you are in the market, who your competitors are, how your competitors kind of appear in them, what that means to you. So yeah, being really clear of where we are, but also be really clear of what Z is as well. So understand from across the business, what does good look like? What are the objectives here? Are they achievable? What is actually the tactics that we're going to get to there? I guess that'll come out after them, but understanding where we are and where we're going, and then we can kind of surface the challenge there. So that's super valuable. Just being upfront and comfortable with that data.
Fantastic. And I think something that I don't know if you've experienced the same, but we work with a lot of brands who maybe think they know their audience and where they sit in the market because they did that piece of work you've described there 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and this is our target customer, this is where we sit in the market. But as you'll know, as the kind of the macroeconomic climate changes, as your competitors change, as customer demands change, your positioning kind of changes as well. So how can you give any advice as to for sure, and can you give any advice as to how brands can go about re-establishing where they sit in the market? What kind of tools and processes can they go through to evaluate that?
Yeah, I mean, quite often that I'll come to a brand and say, this is our audience here, and that's the audience. So if they have bricks and mortar stores, for example, their audience is a certain person or persona, but the digital audience may be completely different, and also where they position themselves digitally might be different as well. For example, let's say it's a luxury brand, a whiskey brand, for example. So their audience, they don't necessarily have a stores, but they'll sell through Tesco's and Sainsbury's and some higher end things on the high street. So that audience is completely different to an audience that might buy their stuff from a Matthew Clark or something like that. That's a reseller of luxury whiskies and things like that. But then the audience that comes to their site is different again. So it's people who might just be casual whiskey buyers who might buy it on the Sainsbury's shop. It might be people who enjoy whiskey and know quite a lot about lots of brands who might buy it in the reseller. But then it's their actual advocates and their real fans that bother going to their D2C site to purchase from there. And the campaign is, depending on who the audience is and who we want to attract and where we want to attract them to, we have to be really certain of who we're talking to across there. So the tools are that, I mean, unfortunately, there's not a huge amount of shortcuts there. It really is a case of speaking to customers, speaking to your internal teams as well to understand who comes to your site, looking at analytics and all that stuff. The good old quant and qual research that takes forever. I would never say to scrimp on this. It's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it's not the fun stuff, but doing this stuff and doing this stuff well basically means everything else works better. Scrimping or dusting over this type of stuff, it can set you up for problems or hurdles or even failure as the campaigns can go on. You really have to be sure of who you are. So the tools I would use, I would reach out to depending who you are, Cantars or people who are consultants, things like that. But there's a million tools. There's things like SimilarWeb that could do some really good positioning against yourself and competitors as well. A good agency will be able to do some competitor market research for you as well. It really does depend on who you are and what you're trying to get out of it, and where you are in the market, I guess, to say what tools you'd use. But yeah, just really lean on your experts and your partners to give you the most data you can and refresh it as well. I mean, we've all gone through, like you mentioned, the socio-economic changes with cost of living crisis, COVID before then, rise of e-commerce before that. So any data that's 6 years old, I mean, it's probably not as useful as it could be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a few pieces in there that particularly hit home for me. And I think whenever often when we onboard a new customer, we kind of have a discovery day with them to do exactly as you described, to understand where they're at now, their audience. And there's a huge gulf in kind of level of understanding between different customers and prospects we have in that aren't always don't always correlate to size. I think one would imagine a big organization that's really successful and huge would have it really nailed down, and a smaller organization might need a little bit of help, but it doesn't always work like that in our experience. And some people will come in with these are our target customers, this is where they are, we know where they are during the day, we know what they do in their spare time, we know demographic, age, intent, all these kinds of things. And others will say we think we have a bigger female to male split, and that's kind of where they're at. So a few of the tools that you mentioned there, working with agencies like so Kantar, the data agency, who obviously do a lot of the analytics on marketing campaigns to understanding how effective TV campaigns and things are. They do a lot of the I think research for JIC-mail, which is the equivalent for direct mail, and understanding how that performs. But then the crucial one that you mentioned there, which I don't think a lot of people do, is speaking to customers. So few brands that we work with will go and systematically go to their customers and say, why did you choose us over your competitor? Why did you opt for this product over that one? And often it's not because customers are unwilling to share that information, it's because brands are unwilling to ask. Because people are generally quite helpful and quite nice. And so if you ask them for that help, why wouldn't you? And I think that's particularly pertinent for brands that do good for the world and charities, where consumers actively want to help you. So go and ask them. Run a focus group, do a survey, ask them one-to-one.
A lot of people, a lot of brands have user-generated content teams or departments as well. That there's a wealth of information there, and also like reviews as well on your site. That I feel like the UGC team and the reviews really are the ears to your customers. Although it's nice to do, get some people in the room and ask them the questions, you probably have a lot of the data there readily available. If you have reviews or any UGC on your site, just listen to that, because it's not just about flash Instagram posts. It's also about listening to what people say, this didn't work well, or this is really great, and just kind of pulling that insight from there.
For sure. And the other point that you mentioned there about having different audiences in different areas. So the kind of example you gave was the bricks and mortar audience versus the digital audience, and a kind of a problem I think a lot of brands come into, and a lot of questions we get is, on the one hand, we're told we need to have a consistent brand tone of voice, consistent brand messaging, and on the other hand, we need to communicate with the different segments of our audience in different channels in slightly different ways. How can brands balance that? So they're having a clear brand identity, but also appealing to very kind of discrete audience segments. It's quite a challenging balancing act at times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess it's just to really have a look at the intent of the different channels there. If we think about a D2C site, let's pick on Marmite. Okay, so Marmite is a brand that you can buy at any supermarket, bricks and mortar, or you can get it on your online shopping. But if you want to bother to go to Marmite's site and to have a look at them and buy it, why are you doing that? Because you're an advocate of the brand, right? You're not going to bother to type in marmite.co.uk and buy a pot or 2 pots of Marmite from there, are you? You're going to do that at Sainsbury's or Tesco's or whoever else you shop at. What you will do is go to Marmite if you're a fan of it, and you might want to buy a limited edition pot, or your dad loves Marmite and he wants to have a personalized Marmite pot and things like that. So these are your advocates, or like the loved ones of advocates of your brands here. So with your site, if you think about it, the friction to get to your site, there's so many different drop-offs that you could go to before you get to Marmite site, and I'm picking on them, but there's so many different drop-offs you get to. The people who go to there have kind of really gone over hot coals to get to you, and they want that extra bit. So they want to learn about how you make the Marmite, and the future of Marmite if you're having a squeezy, or I don't know, whatever it is. And the limited edition products, the gold-plated Marmite thing, and you might have a hoodie and things like that. So that's where you sell. It's not your core offering. Your D2C site isn't necessarily your core sales, where you're going to get most of your sales from, which sounds weird because it's an e-commerce site. What it is gives you the extra. It's really a brand building site, and it allows your advocates to really kind of like get involved with the brand, like learn a little bit more about them. So that tone of voice can really go deep and really go talk about all the extra stuff. If your D2C site is just selling the product, you're really missing out there. But then when you go to the own channels, like your socials, it's so easy. There's so much churn on there. Absolutely, you want to kind of get your message across, but you want it to be quite snappy and make people understand that. Link through to the site if they want to, but you need to cut through the white noise there. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to look at the intent of the channels, the audience who would actually go to those channels, and really like kind of tweak that messaging for them.
That makes total sense. I think understanding which marketing channels or what people expect from the platform they're on, and to be able to deliver messaging to suit that makes total sense. And I think often the example I use is understanding the intent behind purchases. People's why they buy from you or why they buy that thing is super important. And the example I always use is bikes, because you might have somebody who is a mother of 3 in a detached house in the Midlands and a carbon copy next door. Person A buys the bike because they need some kind of way of getting to work. They can't afford a car, so they have a bike as a cheaper alternative. Person B is an environmentalist and wants to buy a bike for environmental reasons. You even have that person C who's buying it for fitness purposes. And then you have those three completely different intents for buying a bike. And then you want three completely different messages to those three individuals for the same product. But again, if you don't go back to that piece we talked about at the beginning and understanding your audience, understanding the intent, understanding what they expect, then you can't possibly gear marketing campaigns towards the relevant areas. I'm just conscious of time. Sorry.
When those guys are shopping, it's also thinking about top of funnel content as well. So they're all going to have a different entry into the funnel. So and the messaging on those different entries to the funnel needs to be geared. So it's one point, isn't it? One endpoint of the PDP to buy that bike, right? But there's all the different routes. So person A is cost saving, let's say maybe money saving expert kind of site. So you might want to kind of talk to them about cost savings and set them through there. And the other person would be a green website or whatever, and the other person will be maybe a triathlon website. And it's all pointing to the same point, but the messaging across the three is different. So it really is understanding where people are, the micro moments that lead to that purchase as well, because they will be different. As just understanding where that comes from. But yeah, absolutely agree with you.
Oh, just conscious of time, because I feel like we could quite happily spend the full hour discussing planning and understanding where you sit in the market and all that kind of stuff. But moving on slightly to, let's say now we understand where we sit in the market, we understand what we're selling, we understand our audience, and now we've got to come up with the best way to reach them. How do we go about that? Because I think a lot of the brands we work with say, we've done a catalog for the last 15 years, so that's what we do. We get a lot of, this is what we've always done, so that's why we continue to do it. If you're a brand looking at it with fresh eyes going into 2023, I don't think I can say that anymore, it's February now, but new financial year from April, let's go with that. Looking at it with fresh eyes, we understand where our target audience is, but how can we figure out which channels and which mix of channels are going to be best to get the performance that we want?
I mean, yeah, I absolutely push against, we've always done it this way. It's not in my makeup, in my brain whatsoever. I think that's trench warfare, and you don't get any further in trench warfare until you just stay in the same old spot. And it might be a good spot, but you don't move forward. So I guess it kind of hits on what I was talking about earlier. So looking at the intent of your different audiences. So when I was talking about you creative for someone who is wanting let's go back to the bike. Creative for someone who's wanting to look at things like for cost saving will be different for someone who wants to have it as they're training for a triathlon. Okay, it may be the same bike, but the creatives. So it's really understanding what speaks to them. Google's got a really good model of see, think, do, care. So C is you're aware that bikes exist in the world, and you might want to put some creative around people who are just aware of bikes. They're not necessarily going to purchase one at the moment, but they know bikes exist out there. Thinkers, when they're thinking about buying a bike, so they put on an extra couple of pounds over Christmas, or they're feeling the pinch and they don't want to put some fuel in the car anymore. So they're aware, so they're thinking about their options of fitness or money saving on transport. Do is then the actual purchasing. So the messaging, how actually when they actually go to purchase this, that's to be really high intent, really clear. So that's we're talking about cost. Any other heuristics that are important for a bike. And then care is like aftercare. So telling people how to lube their chain or bike locks, that type of thing like that. So I'm not a designer, so I wouldn't say this is the way to get your creative, but really understanding where people are across that journey. So in the C element, so that might well be that if we know there's an environmentalist that wants to get a new bike, looking at the types of channels that they go through. So that could be they may well be on social, but they may be interested in the environment. They're looking at images on Instagram or maybe certain Reddit groups that they talk about the environment and things like that, and placing adverts through there as well. But then going down the line and then just think about where they are and all the different elements, and sharpening up the messaging as you go through that. But it can be really tricky to get it right. That's why lots of brands don't get it right. But the execution and the positioning and targeting of that is so vital to make it work as hard as we possibly can. Every single brand could do with an extra 5 more copywriters or another team of designers, or an extra 50% of their paid. Every single brand out there needs to be smart with how they actually put their messaging out there and where they put it as well. So just being smart is the key here, I think. Just really listen to the data. Don't be afraid to change if things aren't working. Be really clear of your funnel reports, traffic to site, all that type of stuff, wherever it's going. Looking at your sales, if things aren't working, you need to change it. Don't keep on hammering against, we've always done it this way. That's what a good strategist will do, is look at what's happening and adjust to the changes of the winds there, because it's all well and good putting down a strategy, but until it's actually working, we may need to change things, and that's fine. And that's what we live in. We don't live in a vacuum here. We live in a thing which changes. I mean, who knows? There may well be a report out next week from the government that says cycling is the worst thing that you can do for your bones, and no one should be cycling at all now, and we need to adjust to that. So we don't know what's happening around the corner, so we need to just really be ears open and eyes open all the time.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned the kind of key criteria there to consider when understanding what messaging mix and what channel mix you need to achieve the objectives of the campaign. So you talked about where the audience sit within the funnel, because somebody who's not aware of bikes or that you sell bikes is going to need a different channel and different messaging mix to somebody who's right on the cusp of buying. Customer intent, so the kind of why they want to buy, that obviously determines messaging and channels as well. Context as well, so the wider context. I think I'd add into that the understanding what, as a brand, you want the individual to do when they see or receive your piece of marketing. So if we're trying to drive them into store, for example, giving them a physical voucher through the post that they can literally take into their local store with a map on it as to where to go to redeem it and get a discount is going to be a suitable option. Whereas if we were trying to drive them online, we might have more a digital heavy campaign, or if we did do any kind of physical marketing, it's with a code or a QR code to drive them on there. So understanding those things that we talked about there, where they are in the funnel, why they want to buy, the kind of context of the wider environment, and what we want them to do helps determine the kind of marketing mix you're going to use for a particular campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And that bleeds into your 4 Ps, and telling on this call that your MVPs and all that type of stuff. So that really then bleeds into what actually is the promotion. Then, because if you notice as well, we haven't actually talked about the campaign promotion. It's about learning the data, how we speak to people, and then that the promotion actually comes out of that from there. And most brands, well, not most brands, poor brands will start with a great idea for a campaign and then kind of retrofit all this stuff in, and that's just the worst thing you could do. I mean, it might be, it might well work, but yeah, you need to start smart. Yeah, because if you will be starting smart.
Often with those, if you have a great idea and retrofit all the rest, you might get a winner 1 in 10 times. But if you start at the beginning and work your way through that, you're much more likely to succeed. Let's move on to talking a little bit about promotion then. So we've established our target market. We understand where they are, what they do. We've talked about a little bit about the channel mix that we're going to use for a campaign. How can we then maximize our chances of success when we go to execute the campaign? What things can we do to ensure it succeeds? I think the classic ones that I talk about with customers is, first of all, defining what success is really clearly. Yeah. We get a lot of people where we say, what do you want to achieve out of this campaign? And they say more sales. And it's like, great, let's break that down. what does success look like for this campaign? If you're putting 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 pounds into execute this campaign, what does it have to pay you back in brand awareness, brand equity, sales, website traffic, all these different metrics that we can measure to be worth it for you? And how do we, what numbers do we need to hit to be able to say, yes, this campaign was a success? I guess that's something that you get quite often.
Yeah, I mean, so when we start off with when we start working with a new client, I tend to run a workshop called a SOSTAC workshop. For anyone who's not come across that, it stands for situation, objective, strategy, tactics, action, and control. So basically what that means is we talk about where we are at the moment, what the objectives are. So that's big blue sky thinking, what, you know, where we want to be in 12 months or 2 years or whatever. And then we start to think about tactics of how we actually might be able to move towards those. And then so strategy and then tactics. And then action and control is about reporting and learning how we adjust ourselves from there. So depending on who the team is, they probably will have slightly different KPIs. So you're not necessarily going to be talking about the same KPIs for a PPC team than an SEO team, for example. But we need to make sure that we're all collaborating and that we're like pushing towards that same goal. So there definitely should be a North Star that you're heading towards. And it really depends on what the needs or the goals and what the objectives are for the campaign. Now, for example, the objectives for Marmite may well be just to get more people on site, maybe a little bit of sales, but it's about brand penetration and just getting people making brand advocates. A campaign for an insurance company that sells through price comparison websites probably is going to be brand building and trust building. And so when people are on price comparison websites, they choose them over someone else. A campaign for a grocer, for example, will be about cutting through and then just traffic and sales, and because they're a reseller. So it's hard to kind of like say what it is. It's just being really intentful of when it starts out what we're going for here, and all that stuff that we've talked about moves towards that. But what was really important is, although PPC, SEO, display teams or marketing teams, e-commerce teams, whoever, may have slightly different priorities and different actions, certainly, that we make sure we're collaborating towards a common goal. The amount of times I'll go into somewhere in the social team and the PPC team, and the SEO team, maybe sometimes the content team, don't really talk to each other, don't really not sure what everyone's aware of. And one team could be running a campaign on its own, which seems kind of crazy, but that's fine. But then the other teams will absolutely be not supporting that as well. Let's say the SEO team are running a campaign for an insurance brand or whatever, and social teams are just not supporting it whatsoever. That seems absolutely crazy. It's not a joined up thinking whatsoever. And in fact, it could actually harm the campaign, because if social aren't talking about it or aren't promoting it, I mean, me as a customer, I'm like, well, what's going on here? I don't actually want to go down the lines of this campaign whatsoever. So just really aligning everyone, making sure everyone's really on board, listen to everyone, understand their priorities, what their backlogs, and all that type of stuff, to make sure that we're actually pushing the right promotion at the right time. And that will be slightly different depending on the channels and the teams and all that stuff. But
I think this is actually it's interesting that you raised it as well, because it's been something that's been raised on previous webinars, is the how common it is to have marketing teams working in individual silos based on either channel or objective. And the risk you have, as you point out, with doing that is you can often you have the best of intentions, but you're driving the wrong behavior. If the SEO's team is all about driving traffic to the website, then that's a potentially a good KPI. But if it's driving traffic that doesn't convert and isn't relevant, then it's not a particularly useful KPI for the business as a whole. And overcoming those kind of siloed ways of thinking can be quite challenging, particularly for larger organizations, and requires quite a strong North Star, as you say, and quite strong senior marketing leadership to be able to take that North Star and break it down into effective KPIs for different teams, and also align them so that they're collaborating and you get the kind of halo effect between channels. The classic example I always use is particularly at large organizations, you very often have an offline team and an online team, and then lots of sub teams within the online team, and they sit at other ends of the office or on different floors and don't really know each other's names. So, but we know if you have a TV campaign and run a door drop campaign after the TV campaign, you get a 20% uplift in responses on the door drop campaign.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't necessarily help the digital or the TV team out, because it doesn't impact their KPIs, but it does help the door drop team out in theirs, which helps the business overall. So overcoming those silos is hugely important. And the other thing that you mentioned towards the start of that was how you work with new brands, doing the SOSTAC workshop. And I think that's an important point to raise as well for the people watching and listening, is how to work effectively with your agency partners. Because in that instance that you described there, they're coming to you as an agency and they're saying, you're talking about what they want to achieve, and you can consult holistically on how to get there, rather than them coming to you and saying, we need an SEO campaign around these keywords in 6 months. And they can get a lot more out of you. And I know it's the same for us. If somebody comes to us and say, we've got a catalogue we want to be printed and delivered, can you do it? The answer is, well, yes, we can, but what's the objective that you're trying to achieve? When do you want to get there for? Can we look at different ways of achieving it? And it's a very, just reframing that question is not how do we buy this commodity cheaply, it's how do we achieve this objective effectively, gets a lot more out of the partners that you're working with.
Yeah. On that, what I tend to do is we may come in as partners for SEO or something like that, but from my perspective, from like an e-commerce kind of strategist, what I'm really mindful of that everyone who has the ability to change something on the site has the ability to help it or hinder it. So as an e-commerce, consultant, strategist, or whatever you want to call it, I set out, so basically making sure that everyone understands what the vision is, what we're trying to do here. So that goes back to the SOSTAC, but everyone understanding what the vision is, more sales most of the time. Everyone understands what that is important. So how that's important for their site, but how that basically means that what they're doing, if we all work together, their bit works really well as well. So that could be the tech team. So that if we get the SEO experts say, well, this bit of the site needs to be updated, or we need a tax change or something like that, they actually look good because they've done some really great work, or the PPC team could actually get some more sales out of it and things like that. So the understanding of the vision, the understanding of the importance of that vision and what that means to them, and that could be site improvements, it could be traffic versus revenue, or whatever it is, and making sure they have thought leaders throughout the whole thing. So we speak to everyone. There's not a siloed approach here. We speak to the development team, we speak to the taxonomists, if there's taxonomists in the team, SEOs, all that stuff, and we have an integrated approach, because if we don't have that, we're kind of pushing in different directions there, and it's only going to be so powerful. It's not going to be as powerful as we could do. Always review performance, and also just be really knowledge sharing. So if my team have come up with something, if we're getting paid by the SEO department, right, and we could just be sitting there all day long optimizing content, but if we find something that we're actually this could help the content team write better, or this could help the dev team work better, absolutely share that, and just share out, because we're really all pushing towards the same goal here. And I guess that's, as a B Corp as well, we're not the kind of agency to hold our cards really close to our chest. We just want everyone to do good work and better work, and kind of like pull together. So that's really important to us, to share that knowledge and make everyone a little bit better, just like everyone level up together.
That's it. It's that message of collaboration over competition. It doesn't just have to apply to working with other agencies. It can apply within your own marketing team as well, because there's bound to be a bit of inherent competition. The SEO team want to outdo the PPC team or whatever it is, or the paid social team, and sometimes a bit of competition like that's good. But like you say, having everybody working towards the same business objectives rather than individual minor marketing KPIs is going to help with that. And I think particularly as we enter the joys of a recession, ensuring there's not, because these kind of changes that we're talking about, they're not difficult to make. They're kind of within teams. They don't cost any more money. It's just a slightly different way of working and framing questions and thinking about marketing problems that can be implemented across lots of companies in some way, shape, or form quite quickly. And that's going to be really important to do, because you don't want to be leaving sales, traffic, and opportunity on the table just because of the way your marketing team is structured internally.
And also, I always say, like, a e-commerce, again, I know I'm talking about e-commerce first, but I'm coming from entity is kind of like a living organism, and it needs to always be growing and improving, because you got to believe your competitors are, and even if you stay still, your competitors will be improving. So zero, incremental value is actually probably a negative when you look at the market. So we always need to be improving, always need to be tweaking, optimizing, all that stuff, because if not, you slowly start getting left behind.
Yeah, so on that point about tweaking and improving and kind of incremental improvements and growth, let's talk a little bit about testing, because with any campaign we do, we always advocate testing something. And I think campaigns that don't are kind of missing a trick, really. If we're doing a mailing campaign to 100,000 people and we're just doing a single version, everybody gets the same thing all the time, it might be achieving an objective, but we're not learning anything from it. And what I feel like a lot of brands do, particularly as we enter tougher economic times, is they start testing when they're on the back foot. They'll notice a campaign drop off and then think, we need to sort something, we need to tweak something, we need to test something to get it on the right trajectory. But when everything's going well and they're getting really good return, they kind of stop and they don't test from that position of strength to continue optimizing, like you say. So if we're running a campaign and we need to decide what to test, how do you go about deciding on that?
Okay.
Broad question for you.
Yeah, I think when you're running, marketing teams, e-commerce teams, campaigns, all that kind of stuff, I think there has to be an element of bravery there. Like I said, okay, I hate people talk about the status quo. We've always done this way, or this worked in the past. That's fine if it worked in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean things can't work better in the future. I think there needs to be an element of testing and pushing boundaries, and not to shy away from that. So one of the pillars that when I write strategies, I always like to make sure that we've got an element that gives people room to be curious and come up with ideas and come up with things to test on there. So a lot of the stuff I do will be within a site environment. So that may well be that we'll look at how we write about a product on a buyer's guide, for example, or a element of text which we can optimize on a product listing page or things like that. But I always want to make sure that we've got room to test that, because if we're really, really honest, if I'm working with Argos, for example, they sell many, many thousands of products. We can choose an element to test on. It's not going to massively affect things. Obviously, if it affects things negatively, we'll move back really, really quickly. But we want to be able to try to update and see if things can work better all the time. Telling you what to test, that's really hard. It all depends on what the data is coming through from. But what I want to do is really listen to everyone, and that means literally everyone. So that could be someone who is a more junior member of the team, but they've got an idea because they're optimizing all day long. So that might be actually optimizing, changing something we write on page. So say, let's write an article that's got 1,500 words rather than 750 words, and so if we can go into more detail and see what the performance uplift was there. But it could also be things like process updates, and if someone's doing the process all the time, they can come up with a better way of doing it. Definitely, let's look at that. I don't want ever to think that just because we've done it this way in the past, we should always do it that way. That is the wrong way to be. It puts you in, puts your line in the sand, and it's just no way progressing forward. So yeah, I can't really tell you what to test. It really depends on the data and the opportunity as well, because the market opportunity will be different. You may well have a look and do some research or some opportunity analysis is there, and you may find a gap that you should go for, and absolutely should go for that and test how you can change your positioning for that opportunity. But yeah, I'm sorry, that's not necessarily the straight answer, but yeah.
No, it's impossible. Like you say, it's impossible to say you should test these three things immediately because it varies so massively depending on brand and channels that you use. I mean, when we're looking at kind of creating hypotheses of, we can go to a brand and say we think this might work better or deliver more traffic or have a bigger uplift in people using your voucher code or whatever. And typically when we're working with customers, we're basing it on things like the Kantar or Jikmail data that we can find online. We're basing it on previous experience. We're basing it on competitor analysis as well. I think that's probably an important point. If your current competitors or your aspirational competitors, so people you might not be competing with yet, but you would like to, what are they doing? Because if they're doing something distinctly different and consistently, it's likely to be working for them. Is it something that's worth us testing as well? So I like the idea of kind of crowdsourcing ideas to test from wider areas of the team. I think that's a really interesting approach. But having a test within a marketing campaign for me is almost a non-negotiable. And I think what makes a good test is really clearly defining what your expected outcome is. So if it's testing a percentage discount versus a pounds off discount or something like that, defining at the outset why you're doing that test, what the performance would be to say this has been a successful test and A has won or B has won, and then also what you intend to do beyond that. So if you say, all right, B has won convincingly, so we're going to then roll that out across the full thing on the next time and test something else, that's fine. If it's we're going to do a test and if B wins, then we'll test it on a bigger chunk, but then kind of go down that route of testing. What I see quite a lot of people doing is here are 5 different things we want to test in a single campaign. Testing it, A wins over B, and them having no idea out of those 5 things that they've tested which has influenced that performance. I think testing is crucially important, but only if done right, so that you get meaningful data and insight out the other end.
Yeah, it's really, really important to benchmark and test small amounts of things at the same time, so you know what works. And you're right, absolutely. You need to make sure what the intent is. So we want to test and we want to have percentage more traffic or X more sales. If it's just things have improved, it's like, well, what's happened on there? I guess as well, from my perspective, that kind of when I'm talking about e-commerce, it kind of falls into 3 different columns, I guess. So it's technical, so what the nuts and bolts of the site. So can we actually change code? Can we change how the site works? Content, so that's everything that sits on the site. So that's words, images, videos, but that's across other channels as well. And then it's the process, so it's how we work together as a team, how we actually prioritize and get stuff updated, all that type of stuff. So for me, the test would probably fit into those 3 buckets, and understand where we can improve. But all those 3 buckets are super important. You can't just have 1 working really well and 2 not working so great, because that's not going to do. Everything needs to work. Everything needs to be looked at. Everything needs to be optimized and working as well as it possibly can. You can't just rely on great content but a poor site and no crappy process, because that's not going to help you. You need a great environment, great content, and a great team to make sure everything's working and that process is working together.
Okay, I guess that's another angle you can look at testing is if you have a funnel, then you typically want to optimize the bottom of the funnel and then move upwards, because the last thing you want is to be putting loads of really high quality leads and opportunities in at the top of the funnel only for it to be leaking out the bottom somewhere. So again, that structure of thinking, how can I optimize the conversion piece and the technical piece on the website first, then how can I optimize the content on the website for conversion, then how can I optimize getting people in to a website that we know has good content that's going to convert and good processes off the back of it. So there's a few different ways I guess we can look at testing. I'm just going to quickly open it up to questions, because we're entering the last 10 or 15 minutes or so. So if anybody's got any questions, chuck them in the Q&A section, and Simon and I'll do our best to answer them. Just while we've got you, Simon, because we've got obviously both B Corps. What value do you think? And I appreciate you also work with kind of ethical brands. What value do you think that adds to their marketing, particularly maybe compared with 5 or 10 years ago? Have you seen it there be a kind of an organic shift from customer demands towards those kinds of brands?
I think, so if we look at tea bags, right? The tea bags that are biodegradable have had increasing sales versus the tea bags that aren't biodegradable. And on that kind of that tiny little level, I think it kind of shows that people do actually care about the products that they purchase and the brands that they purchase from. There's obviously strikes with Amazon workers at the moment, and outside of pay is also, tax and ethical working and all that type of stuff as well. Do I see people not shopping at Amazon because they don't pay their tax? And perhaps not. I think there's a kind of a Venn diagram of convenience versus altruism, where there's kind of people still want to get stuff easy and quickly, but I definitely feel like there's more people worried about where we are as an environment, how we actually speak and deal with other people as well. I know certainly everyone at Organic feels that way, and we've turned down fairly big lucrative contracts with brands that we just wouldn't want to work with because it's not something that fits with how we want to be. And I think as well, I think you mentioned earlier, it's purpose over profit. Sometimes we want to feel like we're doing something good. I know, kind of sound like an old hippie here, and I guess I am a bit, but I think it's more of just being really mindful of, we're here right now, and let's try to push some good in the world. And I do feel like consumers are moving towards that as well. Certainly with the rise of veganism, although I'm not a vegan, that kind of shows that more people out there are thinking about how we eat, what we eat, why we eat it. I think brands that can communicate that they feel the same way definitely would have an edge when it comes to choose from. Yeah,
I think communicating they feel the same way, but actually then walking the walk. I think we talked about in previous webinars the fact that as we enter tougher economic times, I think purpose washing is quite a nice term I came across, where as soon as it until it costs you something, do you really have that purpose that you say you do? And as it potentially becomes more expensive in a recessionary time to continue to have that purpose, how many brands will continue with it? I think will be interesting. Before we finish off, and again, if anybody wants any questions, just chuck them in the Q&A section at the bottom there. Is there anything else that you think we've not touched on that could have a big impact on a successful marketing campaign? I know we've talked through kind of the market orientation piece, understanding where you are in the market, understanding who your customers are and the kind of intent and reason behind buying, understanding that your marketing team have got to have a clear overall objective, not just siloed objectives, understanding that channels have got to work together effectively and be tested effectively in order to deliver incremental improvements to future marketing campaigns. Is there anything else that you think is worth touching on before we wrap up?
I think just to echo the last point you made when we're talking about the funnel, is I think Mark Ritson put it really well, is to have a long-term and short-term view on things. If we only have a long-term view, we'll get loads of people in, but the experience is not good on the site and they won't buy. If we have a short-term view, it's a great CRO, everything like that, but no one's coming in. We need to be looking at long-term and short-term on here and making sure that everything's lined up. If you don't do that, then your campaign will suffer. If you don't do that, then your brand will suffer. We need to really make sure that we've got that pipeline, and when they're on the site, it's a great environment. They go ahead and convert however you want that conversion to be, but just make sure that it's lined up, joined up, and everyone's joined up and talking to everyone else as well. That's super important. Just to make sure that everyone's aware, everyone's on board, everyone's engaged, and pushing towards the same goal.
Fantastic, great stuff. I think We've not had any questions through, so we shall wrap up there. But I'll just leave by saying thanks again, Simon, for your time this morning. And that's been a really interesting chat, and I've made a couple of pages of notes myself, which is all good. We'll get this recorded and shared on YouTube and LinkedIn and things like that. Thank you for all those who've tuned in to watch live, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks again, Simon.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.